Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Bex here today. I have 8 books here that I want to read the first chapter or so of to decide if it's something that I want to keep on my shelves. And because there's 8 books, I'm definitely not going to be able to read them all in one day. So I figured it's just going to happen over the next few days and I'll check in with you. I'm going to let you know the 8 books that I'll be reading and keep it brief because I'm sure I'll get into more details once I've actually read a bit about them. The first 3 books that are on this list are books that I didn't actually pick out for me. They were basically books that other people handed to me and said, you should read this. I think you would like it. Here, take it. And it's one of those situations where you're not going to be like, oh, no, thank you. I was like, okay, sure, I'll hold on to them and see. And now the time has come for me to actually find out if these are things I'm going to like. The first one is one that many of you will recognize, and that is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, a very popular book on BookTube. Not as much lately because I think they're still waiting on the 3rd book in the series to come out. So the hype has died down a bit, but I definitely remember it being popular a few years ago. And as far as I understand, this is a fantasy series, and me and fantasy, we're not really best friends anymore. We're like acquaintances at this point in terms of what I actually enjoy. So I'm gonna give this one a shot. This was a copy that a friend got given, a nicer copy of the book, so she basically gave me her crappier copy, which is fine. It was free. But yeah, I just need to make a decision about this one and whether or not it's worth it. It is a mass market paperback, so it's not really my preferred format for reading, but I can certainly do it. I read all the Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire books in this format, so I can definitely do it. The other 2 that were handed to me to read are both from my sister. She read these for university in her undergrad class. I'm not sure what specific class it was, but something with, English and literature. The first one is the Tortilla Curtain by T.C. Boyle. This is fictional, and I think it's about illegal immigrants, like Mexican illegal immigrants coming to the US and sort of their story. But yeah, I'll find out more and let you know. She said this book was awesome and she thinks I would enjoy it. We generally have pretty similar reading tastes, so I trust her opinion on that. But not always, so I'm definitely gonna at least give it a shot and see. And then the other one, which she said similar things about, is My Year of Meat by Ruth L. Ozeki. This is also fictional, even though at first I thought it was nonfiction just because of the title. I thought it was someone who maybe had been a vegetarian for a long time, something like that. And yeah, no, it's not. It seems like there's going to be 2 different characters that we focus on, and I'm not sure where the meat part is going to come in, but I'll probably find out soon enough. The other 5 are all books that I have picked up for myself at one point or another in the last 9 years of Les and I doing this. The first one is Bill Bryson's I'm a Stranger Here Myself, Notes on Returning to America After 20 Years Away. I really liked Bill Bryson when I started this channel. I have a few reviews of his books up on here, at least, from like 2012 to 2014 era, but lately I have just not been feeling his writing as much. I feel like it's too negative. It's too grumpy old man for me, and I was flipping through the first few pages of this the other day, and I just was not feeling it, was not excited about it, so I want to give it a try, one last try and decide. I do still have his memoir, The Life and Times of the Thunderbolt Kid, on my bookshelf over here, and that one still interests me. It's a memoir about growing up in the 1950s in the US. And that one, I was flipping through that one and I was still interested in reading that, but this one just did not ignite that same passion. So this one is about him coming back to the US after living in Britain for 2 decades. And it's written in the late 90s. So I don't know if the fact that it's now 20 plus years old is gonna bother me or not. But yeah, I don't want like grumpy old man Bill Bryson. I want like funny, interesting tidbit Bill Bryson. So we'll see if this one is like that. The next one is this really nice edition of The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Barbary. This is the Europa editions that have definitely been popping up on BookTube, and I found this at a library book sale a couple years ago. And it was when this book was pretty popular. Like, there was definitely people around who were reading it, so I was curious. I picked it up. It's in really nice condition. However, upon reading the first few pages, I'm just not sure if the writing style is gonna be for me, so I'll have to maybe get over the fact that this is a really nice book, like nice looking, and just, you know, pass it on. I then have Kurt Vonnegut's Breakfast of Champions. This was a book that one of my work colleagues was unhauling. She had a couple boxes of books that she was getting rid of, and I was just kind of going through them. And this one caught my eye just because I've never read a Kurt Vonnegut book before, and I was interested in giving it a shot. I feel like his writing could be a little too quirky, weird for me, but I obviously want to see if that's the case. This one is not as famous as Slaughterhouse-5. I feel like if most people have read one of his books, that's the one they've read. But since I have read nothing, and this is the one that I do have, I'm going to give it a shot and see if his writing is for me. The second to last book is one that I actually bought full price back in the day when it won the Man Booker Prize, and that is A Brief History of 7 Killings by Marlon James. She's thick, very large, which is another reason why I haven't read it yet. But it's just one of those things. I think I bought this because this was at a time where I feel like whatever books were winning prizes, I was interested in checking them out. And now that we're a few years beyond that original thing that I was doing, I've realized like kind of how I want to be more selective about my reading, and these books that win prizes really aren't always for me. So upon looking at this again, I'm not so sure if this was really a smart buy on my part. I'm still interested in reading it. It still calls to me a bit. I'm just not sure if 2021 me is going to be as into this as the year that I bought it. Lastly, we have Inferno by Dan Brown. Oh, Dan Brown. He was so big when I was middle school when the Da Vinci Code first came out. That book was huge, and ever since then I have been occasionally reading Dan Brown's. I read a bunch of his other books that were not part of the Robert Langdon series in high school, and I enjoyed those at the time, but I feel like at this point I'm definitely growing out of him as well. I read The Lost Symbol 2 years ago, which is the third book in the series. This is the fourth one, and that was just, it was okay. It wasn't quite a slog, but I definitely wasn't as into it as I have been in the past, and so I feel like that might happen with this one. I have heard that this is better though, so once again, gonna give it a shot and see how I feel. As is the case with this style of video, I will have timestamps down below where I talk about the different books that I just introed, so if there's only a few that you're interested in hearing about, you can skip right to those. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll check in with you as soon as I've finished the first chapter or so of the first book. So the first book I finished was I'm a Stranger Here Myself, and yes, I did not actually read any books on the day that I filmed the intro, which was yesterday, so yeah, we're starting today. And with this one, I am in the maybe pile with this, the maybe to probably not pile. It's actually a collection of articles that Bill Bryson wrote for a newspaper in Britain. When he moved back to the States, he got contacted by somebody there saying, hey, would you be interested in writing a weekly column? And so he wrote the column from September 1996 to September 1998. So each of the chapters in this book are only a few pages long, and the topic varies wildly. It kind of just relates to whatever was happening that week in his life. So that makes some of the sections interesting and some of them not as interesting. I think what I don't really like about this book is that the articles were written for people reading them in present day, in the mid-90s. And now that I'm reading them in 2021, 25 years later, it doesn't sit as well. Some of the things just don't translate the same. Sure, there's some stuff that is still relevant, and there are anecdotes or mentions of things that are funny, like he mentions the video store. He also had this anecdote about the first time he flew in the States after a while, and he was going to get on the plane and he didn't realize that you actually needed a photo ID to get on the plane. And I was like, wait, there was a time when you didn't need a photo ID to get on a plane? But I guess, yeah, I'm sure licenses at some point didn't have photo IDs on them. I've just always known them to, so I'd never even questioned something like that. So yeah, those little anecdotes can be interesting, but there were chapters that I read where I can kind of feel my interest slipping. This one is gonna go into the probably not pile, and we'll see how the rest of the books shake out. I'm now post-work, another evening, and I decided to pick up The Name of the Wind and try the first chapter in this book because this just gives me fall and winter vibes, and as you can tell by my outfit, the weather today is the complete opposite of what it's been for the past week or so. Today it's barely above freezing, and we're at the very end of May, so I decided to get cozy on the couch with a blanket and a comfy pillow. And the first chapter of this book was actually really intriguing. Not that I was expecting it to be awful or anything, but I liked the writing, I liked the word usage, the flow of the sentences. There's a lot of things being introduced that I'm curious to learn more about. This is clearly a new world, so there's place names and terms that I don't completely understand yet, but it was nothing that frustrated me. So yeah, I think I'm gonna hold on to this one. Semi-surprisingly, I was flipping through the first few pages of the book, and it does have a map, which of course, always preferable. And then it said something about the title of the book. It says The Kingkiller Chronicle, which I now recall is the name of the series, but it says Day 1 on it. The Name of the Wind, The Kingkiller Chronicle, Day 1. So I don't know exactly what the day thing is about, because this is a big book and it's already been like a day in the story. So I guess I'll find that out if I read it. But yeah, I'm sure some of you who are watching this have read this book before, so I would love to hear your thoughts on it because generally it's been very positive. I'm really pleased with this one so far, and I've almost got that feeling like I want to keep reading it, but I've got a lot of other books to try out first. I just read the first 2 chapters of this, plus a preface, and I'm really not entirely sure what I just read. It is definitely wacky, but there are some good ideas in here. I was following along with it pretty much for most of it, and then I think maybe the last half of the second chapter I really started to lose my focus with it. Kilgore Trout, who I've heard of before as being like a famous character that Kurt Vonnegut came up with, and then we have another person who is a car dealer. What's his name? Dwayne Hoover. And Kilgore Trout like writes all this stuff apparently, and then Dwayne Hoover is starting to lose his mind and he's reading what Kilgore Trout is writing and he starts to believe it's the truth. But mixed in here is like all of these thoughts and musings on America and the world. It almost seems like this is set in a more present day, like the book was published in the 70s and sort of like it's set around that time, but it's set in this twisted version. So yeah, I'm definitely a bit confused right now, and so I'm not really sure how to feel about this. It's chaotic, and there are drawings in here, like at the beginning it says that the book is called Breakfast of Champions or Goodbye Blue Monday with this cow drawing, and Kurt Vonnegut does all the drawings as well. At one point he talks about how he's like, to give an idea of the maturity of my illustrations for this book, here's my picture of an asshole. So yeah, that's sort of some of the humor that we're dealing with a little bit here. Somebody who's, yeah, just going for it, just saying what they want, and some of it I'm getting and some of it I'm not. I'm not really sure what else to say. Probably just gonna set this aside and move on. My final book for the evening is The Tortilla Curtain. I read the first chapter and a half of this, and we have 2 families, both married couples. We have the rich, well-to-do liberals who recycle and care about animal rights and generally come off as good citizens, and then the other family are immigrants, illegal immigrants from Mexico, and they are trying to start a new life in America, get steady jobs, and they're currently living in a state park. Their worlds collide when the white liberal husband is driving to the recycling center and he accidentally hits the husband from the Mexican family. Their exchange is very awkward, and because the immigrant is illegal, he just basically takes 20 bucks from our white male character and then disappears, even though he's clearly got a concussion and he's in rough shape. It's very clear that obviously these stories are going to circle back, and on the one hand, I did enjoy the writing. I feel like the writing reflected the characters that we were reading about. I was kind of looking at Goodreads reviews after, and people were saying how much they didn't like the writing style of this book, or like the tone that it had, and I think they maybe didn't like it because it sort of has this stuck-up air to it, but it made sense based on the characters that we were reading about. Like the first chapter was from the white liberal husband's point of view, and then the start of the next chapter is focusing on both the husband and wife from the immigrant family. I am interested in this, but I don't know if it's enough to really hold on to. I'd be very curious to know if you happen to have read this book, because it was published in 1995, so it's been out for a long time, and apparently it has been required reading in a lot of like universities and maybe school, like later school classes for juniors and seniors in high school, so that's probably why my sister read it. And the reviews are very mixed from what I'm seeing. Some people absolutely love it, and other people think it's absolute trash. So I'd really like to know what you think. As far as I know, T.C. Boyle is a white man, so that already kind of makes me feel a little weird when he's writing from the point of view of illegal Mexican immigrants. Like, how much does he really understand their story? I don't know. Because of that, I would really like to hear others' opinions and know if this is actually worth my time, or if it's one of those books that we could probably move past these days. I'm back on the couch under my cozy blanket, and I have read the first 3 chapters of The Elegance of the Hedgehog. This one is intriguing but frustrating, I would say. We are following 2 characters, the first of which is a concierge in, I think it's a Paris apartment building. I don't think it actually says specifically, but based on the context, I think it's Paris. And her name's Renee, and she hides behind this facade of just being this stupid, lowly concierge when she actually is a big consumer of literature and art, philosophy, all of these things. And the other character that we've been introduced to is a 12-year-old girl named Paloma, who lives in the apartment building. And Paloma is extremely intelligent. She is hiding it though from the world because she doesn't want to follow the particular path that a highly intelligent child would have to follow. She spends her days at school dumbing herself down and sort of studying the other students and following what they do. So she's still the smartest person in class, but she's not taking university courses and all of these things. She's still in 7th or 8th grade. This is a bit of a trigger warning for suicide, but Paloma is planning on killing herself on her 13th birthday. It's weird. I don't entirely understand why she's doing it. It seems like she's almost doing it like a wake-up call to all of these people that are just living these lives, and she wants to like shake her family out of their situation and make them see the wider world. But there's other ways that you can go about doing that, so I'm a little confused there, but probably would get some more context if I kept reading and maybe understand the character better. That's part of the reason why I find it frustrating. The other reason is that the writing is very overdone, and I don't know if that is the author's choice because of the characters and who they are, or if that's actually how the author writes. And also, as a side note, earlier when I said the author's name, I forgot that this book was originally written in French, and I did an American English bastardization of her name, so I apologize for that. Yeah, I'm just not sure if that writing style is because of these particular characters or if that's the style of writing that the author likes, because there's a lot of fancy big words in here and I'm not sure if that was really necessary. Like, yes, sure, you're writing about intelligent characters, you can certainly throw in some fancier words, but it's to the point where it almost feels like more of a slog to read through and like get at what the characters are actually talking about. I'm finding this entire exercise up to this point kind of worthless because I feel like the majority of the books I'm just really not sure if I'm like on the fence about. I mean, I guess with The Name of the Wind, that's the only one so far where I'm absolutely sure that I do want to keep it, whereas the other ones, I am undecided. But yes, let's keep going. Next up, I tackled the first 2 chapters of My Year of Meats. This one, I now understand the My Year of Meats and what that means, so it does seem like this book is going to go down the route of like talking about vegetarianism and being anti-meat, but it'll come a lot later. The My Year of Meats is in reference to our main character, or one of our main characters, Jane, who wants to be a documentarian, but that's not quite working out. She's like a struggling artist type in the 90s in New York City, and she gets contacted by an old boss in Japan about producing a show that is called My American Wife, with an exclamation point, that is for Japanese audiences, and it's funded by an American meat company that wants people in Japan and the rest of Asia to buy American meat. And so she becomes a producer on this show, and she refers to it as My Year of Meats because they're basically just traveling around the US and finding different families that have that like American wholesomeness and shooting a 30-minute TV show episode, and then it's being edited and aired in Japan, and of course it's reality television, so it's not really reality. But anyway, so that's kind of the My Year of Meats Jane side of the story. And then on the other hand, we have our other character, Akiko, who is a Japanese housewife whose husband, it turns out, is one of the people that came up with the idea for the My American Wife show. And it seems like at some point, Jane and Akiko's storylines are going to cross. At this point, the book has this bit of humor to it that I'm enjoying. I like the writing. I feel like it's flowing pretty well, and like there's these moments that are kind of awkward and weird, but it's done in like a entertaining way. I almost feel like I'm watching a movie or a TV show. I'm more intrigued by this one than I have been with some of the other ones so far, so that's boding well. I did take a look on Goodreads just to see what the reviews were like, and they weren't quite as split as the Tortilla Curtain, but there was definitely a group of people that really loved this book, and then there were the people that were enjoying parts of it, and then other parts of it they weren't as into. So it just seems to really vary depending on what parts of this book you kind of connect with, and how it does get pretty intense and gross at some points about the meat industry, which I'm okay reading about that kind of stuff. Somebody compared it to The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, so it's gonna get pretty detailed, it seems like, at some point. But I'm interested in this one. I feel like this is the next most solid choice for keeping after The Name of the Wind. Second to last book, I read the first 2 chapters and then I started the third one. The first chapter, I guess, is kind of like a preface. It's from the point of view of Sir Arthur George Jennings, who is this character that's a ghost, and he was pushed off a balcony and he's dead. He's talking to you from the afterlife, but he's talking about how ghosts can kind of see and they know things are coming, and sounds like he's gonna be sort of this figure in the background throughout the story. And then the next chapter was from a character referred to as Bam Bam, and it's a really violent chapter. I understand, like, this book is called A Brief History of 7 Killings, so there's obviously going to be violence in here, but it was pretty violent for the first chapter. And then the next one is from the CIA station chief in Jamaica. There's a list of characters at the beginning, which is going to be very important, I imagine. Yeah, CIA station chief in Jamaica. And I started to read his, and I was just doing it to get an idea of how the book was going to flow. And it seems like each chapter is written like the character is speaking. So it's written in the style, the vernacular that fits that particular character. So some of the chapters are a bit easier to read than others, but they're still all a bit awkward to read. The ghost chapter, I didn't understand really what was happening there, and it was a bit hard to follow, so I actually Googled the name because I wasn't sure if it was a real person or not, and there was a website that somebody had created to sort of explain the character in the book, so I was reading a little bit about that. And then the Bam Bam chapter is very difficult to understand because it's basically run-on sentences for a lot of it, and it's a lot of chaos happening, and there's, you know, the vernacular aspect of it as well, and you're just kind of being thrown into this situation. You don't really have any context for what is going on. I did get through that chapter, and then I started the next one just to see how it was going to be different, and that one is a little bit easier to read, but still not super easy because it is like a character is talking. It makes me a bit sad, but I just think that this isn't going to be for me, having to read chapters like that with each one being a bit different depending on who you're following. I have no doubt that this book is fantastic in its, you know, own way, but I just don't think it's going to be for me. Like, it might be just a little bit beyond me and what I can handle in a book, especially because it is so chunky. It's going to take a long time to get through this, and I don't think it's worth it for me, which makes me sad. The positive note is that that's the second to last book, and now I just have one more to go. Well, Dan Brown may not be the best at writing women, but he is really good at writing a book that grips you, pulls you in, and makes you want to keep going. He purposely knows like how to write a relatively short chapter that like builds tension, then has that big thing happen right at the end of the chapter, so you feel like you have to keep going to at least figure out what's going to happen, and then it just snowballs. You know, something new happens each chapter to build the tension, and that's exactly how I felt with this one. Robert Langdon wakes up in a hospital. He has no memory of what's happened to him, and he thinks he's in Mass Gen Hospital in Boston because he last remembers walking across the Harvard campus, but turns out he's in Florence, and then all of a sudden there's this woman there who's trying to assassinate him. So yeah, no idea what's going on. We have as much knowledge as Robert himself, and yeah, I'm kind of intrigued. I did notice though, and I feel like that was a big thing with the last book, is that the way he writes women characters, it's very much from the point of view of the male gaze, just the words he uses to describe them, and I don't like it, even though the characters themselves are interesting characters and they have a knowledge and a depth to them, like they're not just there to look at or anything, but I still feel like his word choice is just kind of iffy. That being said, this is going to stay on my bookshelf, on my TBR, and yeah, hopefully I will enjoy it as much as I want to enjoy it, and that the story itself will be intriguing. I love the fact that he like uses real art and all that stuff and interweaves it within the story, so it adds this reality to it, which is cool. And I think that's part of the reason why the Da Vinci Code was so popular back in the day. This one stays on the list. The other two books that I am definitely holding on to are The Name of the Wind, which shouldn't surprise anybody at this point, just based on what I've been saying throughout the video. And I am going to hold on to My Year of Meats because it intrigues me enough, and I'm curious to kind of see where it's going to go. I liked the humor element of it, so those are staying on the TBR. 3 books that I've decided I am for sure going to unhaul is Brief History of 7 Killings. Sadly, still pains me because I've been holding on to this book for so long. I just wish me back in the day had been smart enough to open the book and read the first chapter or two, because that's something I do a lot now, especially when I go to library book sales, because you get so excited at all the books that you see. I'll pick anything that sounds interesting and then I'll sit on the floor in a corner and read the first chapter or so of a book to figure out if I think it's going to be for me. And I just wish I had done it with this one, because but at least I bought it from like a local indie bookstore, so I supported them at that point, so not too bad, I guess. And then the other two I've decided to get rid of. I am going to unhaul I'm a Stranger Here myself. I haven't felt any need to keep going with this, especially since I read it first. I was like, well, if I have any inkling throughout the next few days to pick it up, then that'll be a good sign to keep it. But yeah, no, this just isn't the kind of book or Bill Bryson book that I'm just interested in reading anymore. And then the other one I'm going to get rid of is Breakfast of Champions, because yeah, this was just a little too wacky for me, and I was flipping through it again just before I filmed this final section, and it's just, his mind just you start somewhere and then just goes off on this crazy trail, and you just don't know where you're gonna end up, and sometimes I can follow along and sometimes I can't. So yeah, not for me. The final two books that I am not 100% sure about, and I really want your guys' input on it. The first is Elegance of the Hedgehog, and the other one is the Tortilla Curtain. I want to know what you guys think about these books. Do you think it would be worth it for me to read them, or should I just let them go? Because there are aspects of both that intrigue me, but there's also things about each that make me a bit hesitant, and sometimes that hesitation is a good thing, but sometimes it's holding you back, and if you just kept reading a little bit farther, you would realize like you really sink into the story. So let me know. That is everything I have for you with this newest round of Try a Chapter. As always, all of our links are in the down bar. Feel free to check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.